News Talk 610 AM and 102.1 FM. KBNU.
KBNU News Time is 4:05. I'm Bill Walter with this news update brought to you by Mount Logan Laundry. The Bear River Health Department has announced that their department, along with the Department of Environmental Quality, will provide a collection site for e-cigarette waste disposal. And those speaking include Jordan Mathis, Bear River Health Department Health Officer, and Mariella Thompson, Health Educator for BRHD. And those present will include local political leaders, law enforcement, schools, and other community members. Local schools, public and charter, have been invited to drop off e-cigarette waste at a disposal site hosted at the Bear River Health Department's Environmental Health Building. The Department of Environmental Quality has contracted with Clean Harbors to pick up the collected waste and dispose of it properly at their facility. The time it will be at 10:30 a.m. on Monday morning, and it will be at the Environmental Health Building for Bear River Health Department, 855 East, 1800 North in North Logan. KBNU News Time is 4:06. KBNU weather for tonight. Partly cloudy this evening, then becoming mostly cloudy, low around 30. Chance of rain showers tomorrow, 50% chance. Slight chance of thunderstorms in the afternoon. Cloudy, high temperature in the upper 50s. Rain showers likely, slight chance of thunderstorms Saturday evening, and then mostly cloudy, becoming partly cloudy on Sunday. Cooler, high temperature in the lower 50s. And we've been to 47. It's 47 degrees right now at KBNU. KBNU weather brought to you by Whole Tree Care. Right now is the best time to get your trees and shrubs trimmed. Visibility is perfect right now, so do it before they leaf out. Call 760-6587. Whole Tree Care has a certified arborist and best cleanup crew around.
Have you pulled your spring sheets out of storage, and do they smell stale and need freshening up? How about your blankets and your quilts? Are things dingy from winter use? Well, go to Mount Logan Laundry. It takes no time at all to freshen everything up with their 55 and 80-pound washers and dryers, and it costs a lot less than the dry cleaners, and free Wi-Fi and drop-off service too. Mount Logan Laundry really is the cleanest spot in town. Find them at 5th East and 9th North in Logan, or in Brigham City on the corner of 1st East and 7th South.
KBNU News Time is 4:07. 4 teenage boys were on dirt bikes when they had discovered what they believed to be a human body, according to officials. On April 8th, Rich County Sheriff's Office received a call that a body had been located near a road approximately 5 miles west of Randolph. Rich County officers responded and started investigating the scene. They contacted the Weber County Sheriff's Office for assistance, and 2 people who specialize in crime scene preservation were dispatched. No identification could be located, although it appeared to be the body of a young woman. An autopsy was performed Monday by the State Medical Examiner's Office in collaboration with the Sheriff's Office. According to police, the Medical Examiner's Office was able to obtain fingerprints from the body. The body was identified as 22-year-old Sophia Lauer of Layton. Police said her family reported her missing on March 29th after not hearing from her for a couple of weeks. The Sheriff's Office contacted a detective from the Layton Police Department, and the case is still under investigation. And 49 Yellowstone National Park bison were shipped to slaughter, killed by hunters, or captured for relocation this winter, well short of the officials' goal to remove 600 to 900 of the animals. The park has about 5,000 bison, also known as buffalo. The herds are culled annually under a federal-state agreement that's meant to keep their numbers from growing and to prevent bison from spreading the disease brucellosis to cattle. The culling program depends on large numbers of bison migrating into Montana, but this year's migration was not very large. KBNU News Time is 4:09. For more details on these and other stories, visit CashValleyDaily.com.
Breaking news and stimulating talk. News Talk KVNU, 610 AM and 102.1 FM.
I don't know how else to say this, Dad, but here it goes. It's time for the famous West Motor Rodeo Day sale.
Wait a minute. What are you talking about, Taylor? Rodeo Days doesn't start until July.
New truck lots across the country are almost empty, right?
You're right.
But here at West Motor, business is booming. So how is West Motor selling so many trucks?
Most of our customers are ordering their truck exactly how they want it. So as soon as the truck hits the lot, they don't let us keep it there for everyone else to look at. They want to take it home. So the best way to buy a new truck during the famous West Motor Rodeo Day sale is to order it right now during Truck Month.
Now that's what I'm talking about.
Plus, trade-in values are at an all-time high. And in many cases, you can buy a brand new truck for less than a used one. We'll include our famous Rodeo Days discounts, a free lifetime warranty, and a free bed liner. Taylor, you're brilliant.
Call, click, or visit West Motor and order your new Ford or Ram truck today. WestMotorCompany.com.
After that long, cold winter, my green grass blades are dingy, yellow, and smashed down. I need a little help waking up. Oh, and I need help fighting off those pesky weeds. What can I do?
Don't worry, friend. Logan Extermination helps lawns come out of tough winters. And right now, they have a special on pre-emergent and fertilizer application. It'll keep weeds down and green up your grass for only $55. Call Logan Extermination for details. 752-8450. Based on maximum 5,000 square feet.
There's nothing like hearing the songs you love on local radio with no subscriptions and no monthly fees. But there's a new bill in Congress that could stop the music. If passed, this bill would tax your local radio station simply to play the music you love. Text LOCAL to 52886 and ask Congress to support local radio stations. Help us keep you connected to the music, local news, weather, and traffic that you need each day. This message furnished by the National Association of Broadcasters.
For the people.
We are waiting with bated breath for news from the Cash Republican Party meeting an executive committee tonight.
With Jason Williams.
And I'm really excited about this next segment. We have two guests here in studio. We're going to talk about something that we've talked about many times here on the show, but from a bit of a different angle.
Weekday afternoons from 4 till 6 on News Talk KVNU, 610 AM and 102 FM.
Welcome to KVN News for the People. Friday, April 15th. I'm Jason Williams. Bill Walter here in the studio as well. Andy Morgan coming up at 5 o'clock for the People movie show. Quite a bit to talk about. 3 new movies in theaters this weekend we'll go over and hear what Andy had to say or thought of the movies that he got out to see this week. That's coming up at 5 o'clock. Kicking things off here in hour one, we, on Tuesday, talked a little bit about this public comment period that closes on Monday regarding a development proposal here in Logan City. It's roughly, you can see, I've linked to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers request for public comment on this, which, again, must be submitted by Monday, April 17th, if you'd like to weigh in. It is a large proposal, and the easiest way to think about where the proposal would be located is roughly across the street from Icon, or iFit, as they call themselves now. It's the south end of 10th West on the west side. We spoke about the public comment period and how you can go about submitting public comment for or against, or if you just have something you'd like to throw in as far as considerations. That is what the public comment period is for. And during that segment, we spoke with Dr. Frank Howe of Utah State University and a member of the Logan River Restoration Task Force. And Frank expressed some concerns they had as a task force over the development, specifically mentioning the proposal would fill in 5.5 roughly acres of existing wetland and about 4,000 feet roughly of stream bed, and would create 2 man-made lakes. It would then be housing development of about, if I understand correctly, 123 individual homes, about 180 units in 6 different apartment buildings, and would obviously bring a lot of housing to Logan. Frank expressed his concerns on the show on Tuesday. If you'd like to hear what the Logan River Task Force concerns were and more about the public comment period, that is available on the podcast via the Podcastic service. Just search for KVN News for the People, and you'll find that there, or follow the link on our Facebook page. The developers reached out to us. They wanted a chance to talk a little bit about some of the concerns expressed by Frank, speaking as a member of the Logan River Task Force. And so we said, absolutely. This is what the show is for. So joining us right now from the Willow Lakes Holdings LLC development organization or company, one of the partners in that organization, Brett Nelson, joining us. And Brett, I appreciate you taking some time for KVNU today. I know, no one wakes up in the morning and thinks, I'm prepared to be on the radio with thousands of people listening. So we appreciate you doing that, especially on short notice. Tell us a little bit about, first off, why they don't get involved in every development, obviously. Why is the Army Corps of Engineers seeking public comment on this one in the first place?
Yeah, well, the Army Corps of Engineers is involved anytime there's even a very slight amount of what you would call wetland impact, right? And when I say slight amount, anything greater than a half of an acre of wetland impact. And it doesn't, just for perspective, it doesn't matter the size of the project. You could be developing thousands of acres or 1 acre of property. And if it impacts more than a half of an acre of wetland, the Army Corps gets involved. Okay, makes sense. That was a question that we actually didn't cover on Tuesday, speaking with Frank, and a lot of listeners inquired afterwards why the Army Corps of Engineers was involved. Again, the public comment period wraps up on Monday, but that's by no means the end of this, right? Yeah, that's actually the first step with the Army Corps. The application is filed. It always goes out for public notice because we want to hear from the public. And then basically any issues, any substantive comments that come up are addressed and resolved if necessary, and then it moves forward from there. And you, Brett, and your partner, as I understand it, have been actually in conversations with everyone involved. I know everyone likes to believe that there's always a battle going on, and there's always two sides warring with each other. But you've actually been in conversation with members of the Logan River Task Force, right? Yes, we've been in conversations with them, and actually, this isn't something that has just happened overnight. Sure, we've actually been planning this for nearly 3 years now. So this isn't just shooting from the hip. We've been in discussions with top consultants, national consultants, from environmental consultants all the way to engineers, civil engineers, hydrologists, and then also as we met with the city includes the Logan River Task Force and others in those discussions as well. And so we've had plenty of discussions with all of the different agencies that are pertinent to the project, as well as nationwide consultants. Sure. That's when I spoke with your partner, arranging the interview today. He mentioned that the concerns expressed by Frank were not news to you guys, and that you've tried to offset some of these things to alleviate concerns, right? Yeah, and in fact, the process itself actually already demands that things are offset. So, for example, some of the stuff I wouldn't be as negative as to call things misleading a lot of times, but a lot of times half of the information makes it out to the public, and they don't understand exactly what the process is or what we're actually volunteering to do in a lot of cases, and then required to do in other cases. So, for example, in the lead up to in your intro, you referenced the application. Reference to an impact of roughly 5.5 acres of wetland impact. Sure. Right? The process already requires that if a developer impacts, say, a single square foot of wetland, it gets replaced at a multiple. So often 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4 to 1. So in this case, we're impacting 5-ish acres, and we will be replacing or recreating in a higher quality and uplifting at least 12, maybe as much as 15, maybe as much as 17 acres, right? And in a better location and at a higher quality than the ones that we're actually disturbing. So it's actually a net benefit in this case to the ecology and to the wildlife. And for example, the other kind is the stream. As you say, there are, roughly 4,000 lineal feet of perennial stream. Perennial stream is a technical definition. In this case,
Sure.
the vast majority of it is an engineered ditch that was cut through the land to water cattle.
Okay.
And to use as an irrigation base to water the hayfield, right? So it's not a babbling brook that we're talking about. It's an engineered ditch.
Water has run there at some point, right?
Yeah, water runs through there, mostly drain water from, as we know the Logan River Golf Course, right? We're all familiar with it, and a lot of the drain water that comes off of that is used to irrigate and to water cattle on this property, and they cut a ditch through the property to direct the water to where they wanted it. And yes, it's under the jurisdiction of the Army Corps of Engineers, so we classify it as a perennial stream.
Interesting.
And again, as we impact it, we have to uplift the Logan River and the Little Logan River as the two adjacent. We uplift the ecology around them at a multiple to compensate for the impact that we have on that ditch.
And what does that require for you as the developer? If the Army Corps of Engineers, in the guidelines, which are set federally, sometimes by the state, they say, for example, okay, you're going to displace 5.47 acres of existing wetland, and you're going to create 3 times that. Does that have to be? That has to be created on the same property that you're developing, right? Kind of.
It doesn't. Kind of. It doesn't have to be. So for a lot of projects, you'll see that the city does. They will, for example, create wetland over near the landfill, the old landfill, right, where it's more suitable. Like, for example, if you impact in the middle of a city, it's hard to replace it in the middle of the city, and It wouldn't do the wildlife any good anyway in that location, right? In our case, I'm not sure if your listeners are familiar with the fact that we actually volunteered to negotiate with the previous landowner and with the city in getting a 47-acre conservation easement, or a nature preserve, which essentially contains the entire Logan River and provides a buffer zone. So we would ensure against development really right up to the riverbanks, as you see, for example, up in the middle of the city in the island area where you've got houses lining the immediate bank of the river. We helped negotiate the deal that would allow for a 47-acre conservation easement that would buffer any development from the riverbank, right? And so a lot of the mitigation we're talking about when we say we'll create better and uplifted wetland will be within that nature preserve zone, that conservation easement.
Interesting. This is, and I say this in a positive way, though some won't hear it as a positive out there because we're all kind of grappling with these changes. But this is a large development. A lot of homes, right? 100. Do I have the numbers right? 123 individual homes and about 180 apartments that would be in 6 different buildings. Is that correct?
Yes, the aim is that for sure. So 123 homes are the platted number of lots, and then the multifamily is a goal of ours. We have an extreme housing shortage, as we all know.
Sure.
And our goal was not to, approach this. When we talk about the design of the development, I don't know if your listeners are aware, there's about 5 or 6 other private lake developments in northern Utah.
Sure.
And every one of them is a private gated community with a very few number of homes, like up to maybe 35 or 40 homes, but certainly not anything larger. Most have 15 or 16 homes, and they're private gated communities. We, being a couple Logan boys that actually, I grew up in the Woodruff neighborhood where this is located. I attended Woodruff Elementary and lived there until I was in my mid-20s. We wanted something better and more accessible for the community here, not a gated community, something that helped relieve the housing stress, and something with a broad demographic. So a mix of, condo-style affordable housing, all the way up to mid-range housing on smaller, maybe quarter-acre lots, all the way up to some larger lots, and the type of homes you might see in the bench areas, right, of North Logan and Providence and Millville.
Sure.
Right?
I appreciate Brett taking the time to do this because this is a complex process that oftentimes is even just understanding the mechanics of what's involved, very difficult. So hats off to both you and Frank on Tuesday for, explaining what it actually takes to get. And this is all, not a single spade of dirt has been overturned, right?
Correct. And it's been 3 years. So you can imagine the cost and the amount of man hours and financial dollars that go into just getting ready to start something like this.
It's so interesting to see, and it's, here on the show, Brett, a common theme that pops up. I tell people all the time, we don't like change. It's human nature to resist it a bit. I get sad when I drive through certain parts of my hometown here in the valley and see places I rode my bike as a kid or splashed in a frog pond as a kid, and now it's just subdivisions. But the alternative is when everyone's kids turn 18, we wave goodbye and they have to move somewhere else. And that's literally the two choices at this point with the growth that's projected, even though it's a bit lower than what's projected in other parts of the state even. So this is the reality we're facing. These things are necessary, and 123 homes, 180 apartment buildings, that goes a long ways to impacting positively the housing crisis here in Cache Valley. What happens next in this process? So on Tuesday, Frank said one thing he would like to see, and as I understand it, you guys are on board with this too, a bit of a public hearing on this before anything actually gets underway.
I mean, one thing to be clear on is that there have already been public hearings on this, so this wouldn't be the first one.
Okay.
As I said, this has been going for years now, and so there's been a couple public hearings. This would be the first one that the Army Corps is holding under their jurisdiction, but this has been out in the public sphere for a while. So it's been going on so long now, and there's been so much information collected and so many experts working on this that while we welcome public feedback and we're happy to make sure that everything is transparent, there's not really a lot that's left to come out because there's been so much feedback already. There's not much left to consider. One other thing that I would mention is that I did listen to the show and previously, and some alternative sites were mentioned and maybe trying to push the development into more upland areas. That was suggested, but what needs to be acknowledged is that that's already happened. There were 3 or 4 other locations considered in the valley for this. This is the one that was ended up being chosen, and then also within this site, the original plan actually had more homes. It had 100 and almost nearly 170 homes, and they were more proximate to the river, so they were more on the actual river banks, and they were more highly impactful in the wetland arena, right? And so the process then requires us to actually get the delineation of the wetland and to establish what exactly is wetland, right? And then we look to have a conservation mindset and say, well, first we avoid, if we can, to whatever extent possible, and then we mitigate. That's when we replace and recreate and uplift, right? And so we went from 170 developable acres to now where we've moved toward the upland areas and excluded the wetland areas from the project, and now we're only developing something like a little over 100 acres. So the things that are being requested or suggested have already occurred. Like, we've already taken the advice of top experts and made those changes and I don't want to tout this too much, but at a huge financial expense, right? So you can imagine if we shrink the development area from 170 acres down to 101 acres, there's a lot that has to be given up to do that. Many, many lots that otherwise would have been developed. And we did that because, being from the area, we saw the public good. We said the public would benefit extremely from initially 47 acres of conservation easement along the river corridor. We're working on donating another 25 acres to that voluntarily, and also creating public access. For those unfamiliar, right now it's private property, and Utah's got those weird laws that other states don't have. Utah's laws say that you can't actually enjoy the river if it's running through private property. You are subject to trespass. We don't believe that should be the case. As the owners of the property and as this development, we say Logan River should be open to the public. But unfortunately, that stretch of river is in incredible disrepair. And so it needs millions of dollars worth of uplift and restoration. Old cars removed, old concrete riprap removed, tarps, erosive control on the blue clay. It needs extensive repair. And so there is a separate effort underway to accomplish that, separate from the Willow Lakes project. But they came to us and said, we need someone to pay for that. And we were the ones that stepped up and said, we see it as a benefit, not just, for the development to have like a nice nature preserve next to it, but also for the public to gain access to the river that currently is inaccessible and impassable.
Because this is, for listeners, again, to to explain what Brett's referencing here, this is river that is sections of the river flowing through what has been just basically farmland for decades, and so there is. I've seen bits of this. There are cars that have been pushed off. That was a popular thing back in the 50s, and it's. But again, all of this speaks to kind of these dualities we're grappling with here in the Valley. And Brett, I know as a resident of the Valley, you probably grapple with them yourselves a bit. I know your partner as well. He teaches real estate at Utah State University. Let me ask you this in closing: did you know what you were getting into when this started 3 years ago? Were you prepared for the lengthy process, for the Army Corps of Engineers and some of the difficult hoops they have for you to jump through? Did you know what you were taking on?
You always wish that it goes faster, right? You always wish that it's easier. We understand that the public doesn't understand all of the various information and isn't presented with all of it all the time. And so to the extent that people kind of push back against it, that maybe draws things out a little bit. But I would assure the public that this has been incredibly well planned out. And unfortunately, some of the opposition is working off of old knowledge that doesn't have access to the information that, the new scientific studies and the new engineering that's happened along that stretch of the river. And so they're pushing back saying, we have concerns on this, but the concerns are a little bit unfounded now because so much work has gone into it already. They've already been solved.
Brett, this has been a fascinating conversation, and I appreciate taking the time out of your day because I know, this is just one more headache for everyone involved, but it's gone a long way. I hope for our listeners to kind of explain the process, what it takes to get a development like this underway. Again, you can listen to Frank's interview on Tuesday, too, where he expressed, where they're coming from as a Logan River sort of protection group, some of the concerns they have going forward. You can see the Army Corps of Engineers site, which has some pictures, maps, and does include, as we mentioned, some of the alternative sites Frank mentioned. They also have at the Willow Lakes Holdings website, Brett, you guys have put a video there that kind of does a nice overview of what exactly we're talking about here when we're discussing this development, what it will look like, what's envisioned. And listeners, you can see that at willowlakesutah.com. But, man, what a perfect way to kind of give voice to both sides of what is going to be a never-ending discussion here in Cache Valley over the next, probably forever. As we grow, as development is needed, as more homes are needed, we're going to have to accept changes. If we do it smartly, if we plan carefully, it doesn't have to be a negative. Brett, really appreciate your time today. Brave of you to step up and give voice to this. I know that's not what you're planning to do when you start looking at a development project, but really appreciate taking some time to come on air here today and talk about this. And any final thoughts for listeners? If there are people out there listening that say, well, I'd like to know more, I've still got questions. I know you guys have put a lot of information about the development on the site, willowlakesutah.com. Any other recommendations for listeners?
I would say the one comment we get the most from listeners, other than outside of the experts, is that they say, what about the water? One comment I would make very briefly is that this development actually uses less water than every other alternative development, including the current agricultural use of the property. And that sounds counterintuitive, but that's the most common concern of the citizenry.
Sure.
And so I would say, in fact, this uses less water than all the alternatives. And so if anybody would like to know how that's actually the case, they're welcome to reach out to us, and we'll explain it. I'll put a Facebook post up on the Cache Valley Facebook pages and things like that if they'd like a description as to why that's the case.
Very nice. A pleasure to have you here on the show. And again, thank you so much for doing this. I know it's not the job of a developer to do this, but to explain the process, to talk about what this takes, it's just fascinating to hear, and we'll see where things go from here. Brett Nelson, a partner at Willow Lakes Holdings LLC, has been our guest. And again, if you want to learn more about what they're proposing, check out the video they've posted at willowlakesutah.com. And, of course, you can see the Army Corps of Engineers description of the project and instructions on how to submit public comment by Monday. That's the deadline. I've linked to that on our Facebook page. I won't even try to read that link here on air. They make those links difficult with the Army Corps of Engineers. But there is a link on our Facebook page for that. I've also linked to the Willow Lakes Utah.com site. You can find that later if you're listening and driving now. And one more time, a big thank you to you, Brett Nelson, partner at Willow Lakes Holdings, LLC. Brett, appreciate your time today, and we are more informed for you taking it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. But that was Brett Nelson again, partner at Willow Lakes Holdings, LLC. Again, willowlakesutah.com. They've got a video of what we've been discussing here. I've posted a link to the Army Corps of Engineers site with this kind of a written-out description of the project. And you can also hear Frank's interview from Tuesday on our podcast. This interview, if you're just tuning in, will be available on our podcast by tomorrow morning as well. And really just unintentional, but a deep dive almost into what development in Utah is like right now, what the challenges are, but also the need out there and the competing needs like, thinking about things like the river and its quality, but also the need for homes and apartments. We're not building them as fast as we should be right now for the demand and the need out there. We have Valley residents sleeping in cars, and that's no exaggeration. Man, it's a challenging world, a lot on the line for everyone involved. So really appreciate Brett Nelson and earlier this week Frank Howe for coming on to talk about the two sides of these things. This will, again, be a never-ending discussion. We're going to need to keep developing. We're going to need to keep doing it smartly, and appreciate the developers in this case, putting their own names out there on the line to bring some transparency to it and help people understand. That's something I think we all could do more of. Brett Nelson with Willow Lakes Holdings was our guest again here on the show. Thank you to him for his time. Thanks to our listeners for tuning in. All the relevant links on our Facebook page. And we'll be back right after these headlines with KVNU's Bill Walter.
Thank you, Jason. KVNU News Time is 4:36, and the news is brought to you by Northern Steel Buildings. A 23-year-old Paradise man who was previously convicted of enticing teenagers to have sex with him has pleaded guilty again for sexting with several young girls. Dayton Chavez has been in the Cache County Jail since being arrested back on December 3rd. Chavez participated in a virtual hearing in 1st District Court Wednesday morning. He accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to one count of dealing in materials harmful to a minor, a third-degree felony. Defense attorney Joseph Saxton explained that as part of the plea agreement, prosecutors agreed to drop a second charge against his client. Chavez was arrested after law enforcement learned that he had been contacting a 15-year-old and two other teen girls on Snapchat. During the exchanged messages, he tried to trade naked photos with one of the girls. The crimes occurred while Chavez was on probation for a similar crime. In 2018, the defendant was convicted of trying to coerce a teenage boy and girl to have sex with him. He was later sentenced to 120 days in jail and 5 years probation. Chavez spoke only briefly during Wednesday's hearing, telling the court he was willing to waive his rights to a trial and plead guilty to the crime. He did not provide any excuse. Chavez is currently being held without bail. He is scheduled to be sentenced June 8th and could face up to 5 years in prison. South Ogden police are looking for a woman who has not been seen for 11 days. In a post on Facebook, the department said Delaney Wright left her home on April 3rd for a date. While this is not unusual behavior for her, police say she usually stays in contact with her family. According to police, her family is worried and wants to make sure she is safe. As of Thursday, police say no one had seen or heard from Delaney. They believe she went to the Salt Lake area. Anyone with information is asked to contact the South Ogden Police Department. And a planned debate among Republican candidates aiming to be Idaho's next lieutenant governor has been canceled. Idaho debate officials today say the debate between House Speaker Scott Bedke and State Representative Priscilla Giddings, set for Monday, was canceled after Giddings backed out. Idaho debates officials say that Giddings required pre-approval of reporter panelists who would be asking questions, but Idaho debate officials say they do not reveal reporters on a panel to any candidate in advance. Idaho debates are a collaboration between the Idaho Press Club, Idaho Public Television, the League of Women Voters of Idaho, and Idaho's public universities. KVNU News Time is 4:39.
The planet Earth has been rotating around the sun for 4.5 billion years. Since the dawn of man, we have been crafting and refining tools to dig into the Earth's surface.
Me dig. Me tired.
But it wasn't until today that digging could be so much fun.
Me digging this.
Northern Steel Buildings will dig for you. Have them build you a hay barn, shop, warehouse, or if it's time to expand your business with a new facility, they'll move the earth around to make it happen. See their work online at northernsteelbuilding.com.
KVNU weather for tonight, partly cloudy this evening, then mostly cloudy, low around 30. Chance of rain showers, slight chance of thunderstorms in the afternoon Saturday. High temperature in the upper 50s with south winds 10 to 20 miles an hour in the afternoon. Rain showers likely Saturday night, slight chance of thunderstorms, low around 30, and then mostly cloudy to start Sunday, becoming partly cloudy, and the high temperature in the lower 50s. It's 46 right now at KVNU. Cache Valley's most trusted name in hearing aid technology is Cache Valley Hearing and Audiology. Call Dr. Paul Daines at 753-HEAR or visit cachehearing.com. For more details on these and other stories, visit CacheValleyDaily.com. No stock market today because of the Good Friday holiday. That will return reports on Monday.
Dr. Josh Red, chiropractic physician, explains how Red River Health and Wellness can help you.
A lot of our patients end up having autoimmune conditions. This is where their immune system, rather than attacking bacteria, a virus, or other bad things, it starts to attack their own tissue. This can cause so many different issues and symptoms throughout the whole body. The biggest thing for us at Red River is to identify what's causing the autoimmune response to flare up. This could be intestinal problems, blood sugar imbalances, cortisol defects, hormonal imbalances, along with something as simple as dietary triggers and environmental triggers. One of the most common causes, too, when you have an autoimmune condition is you'll have inflammation throughout the whole body. Not every patient will have the same imbalances or the same triggers, and so we have to customize a very personalized treatment plan in order for these patients to feel better.
Schedule your appointment today at 855-55-RIVER. Red River Health and Wellness with offices in Logan, South Jordan, Springville, and St. George.
Call Red River today. NMLS 1817019.
What's a freedom loan? This is Rod with LendRight Mortgage. Here's an example. On the day this ad was recorded, the largest credit union in Utah quoted a 30-year rate of 4.875% with over $8,000 in closing costs. LendRight's Freedom Loan APR is 4.625% and covers 100% of the closing costs for the same $647,000 loan amount. So you get a 0.25% lower rate, a lower monthly payment, and we pay all the closing costs. Save thousands in upfront costs and get a lower rate. Call 801-APPROVE or visit lendrightmortgage.com. Declare freedom from higher rates and fees with the Freedom Loan. Call 801-APPROVE or visit lendrightmortgage.com.
Adams Wealth Advisors' entire team says, thank you, Cache Valley, for voting them the best financial planner in the Best of Northern Utah competition. Honesty and integrity is the hallmark of Adams Wealth Advisors. Let them earn your trust today.
This is Craig Adams. At Adams Wealth Advisors, we are here to help you receive peace of mind, whether you've done a lot of planning or a little planning. Count on our team at Adams Wealth Advisors for honesty, professionalism, and integrity.
Visit adamswealthadvisors.com or call 752-1702 to schedule a time with an advisor today. Please see adamswealthadvisors.com for more information on these recent awards.
Well, fans, it's the final play of the game. Home team's down by 1 point with 10 seconds on the clock. Johnson's looking for the open inbounds pass. He gets it to Dawson, and he breaks free. He's driving for a quick layup, and what? He stopped mid-drive. What's he doing? Insane! He just quit playing.
If you got your first vaccinations for COVID-19, don't stop there. Visit coronavirus.utah.gov to schedule your booster.
Looking for a job or career change? Plan to attend Cache Valley Media Group's Job Fair, Thursday, April 21st at Castle Manor in Hyde Park from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. And be prepared to talk with 30-plus businesses looking for employees now, like Biomat USA, Deluxe Custom Carpentry, Cooper Takeoffs, R.R. Donnelly, JBS USA, Whitaker Construction, TTM Technologies, Murdoch Auto, West Liberty Foods, and more. Thursday, April 21st from 11 to 6 at Castle Manor in Hyde Park, presented by the Cache Valley Media Group.
Welcome back to KVN News for the People. Two big headlines dominating the news here for the state of Utah today. The first is, well, depending on how you look at things, maybe both will be good news to you, but definitely not a good. Senator Mike Lee's probably got a headache right now. That's the second story we'll get to. But the first story, very good news. We, for the entire week, first time since March of 2020, for the entire week of Utah, entire week in Utah, we don't get our own weeks. For the entire week in Utah, that is Saturday or Friday of last week to today, the Utah Department of Health has reported a steady and consistent. This is the first time it's held up for 7 days. It's been happening for a while, but the first time it's been consecutive 7 days in a row. A consistent and very significant decline in not only cases, because remember, once the state stopped testing aggressively, cases are really not much of an indicator anymore. Another way to put that, there's a lot more out there than is being caught. But hospitalizations remain an unavoidable indicator because when people get sick and get very sick, they head to the hospital. And if it's serious, they get hospitalized. But even hospitalizations have been going down. In fact, the only place where you can find an increase, and it's not a statewide increase, Robert Gerke at the Salt Lake Tribune does what he calls the poop watch. This is his daily report on the numbers as they come into the Utah Department of Health from the statewide sewer monitoring system, which, again, if you're not familiar with that, it's not just something to giggle at. It's actually probably for future pandemics, fingers crossed that there isn't one, but odds are within the next 100 years there will be another one. If history has a 100-year pattern, then that's likely. I don't know what it is with the 100-year pattern, but it seems to be the case, or at least for the last two. Another one's going to come along. If it's not a virus, another public health emergency of some kind will come along. But the sewer water monitoring system is basically the earliest indicator. That's what Utah found. A pilot program started here in Cache Valley and 3 other places, and then was more funded by the legislature and taken statewide. And other states have adopted this and started using the same process and technology too. It was basically the earliest indicator of an outbreak, even a small, household outbreak or single community outbreak will be indicated. The first test of that was actually the 2020 JBS outbreak in June of 2020, which was the first big surge here in Cache Valley. We've been relatively left harmless compared to the rest of the state through March, April, and May. And then at the end of June, and man, do we feel naive now. Remember that, Bill? I remember talking about those reports, and you and I would read the report as Craig Hislop would send it in each day from the county health department. And it was like, oh, my goodness, 283 cases. 210 cases. It's over 200. We went from like 8 a day to like 200. And remember, and then, man, if we knew what was coming still... but yeah, now
got even worse.
Yeah, that's now we're on the downhill side of this. There's still variables. That's a key word to use because now there's a variant of the variant of the variant.
Which is even more contagious.
Even more contagious.
So
but
I guess if you just look at somebody across a field who has it, you'll have it. Or
the direction these variants have been headed, we're headed there to where even eye contact is enough to transmit the virus. But it also appears to be as mild as, if not milder, than Omicron, which proved to be basically the final end of this pandemic.
Well, and apparently, because so many people caught Omicron because it was so contagious.
Yeah, it floated in the air for up to an hour.
And apparently those that have had it through Omicron have, I guess, immunity to these latest variants.
Yeah, that was...
Or at least they won't get very sick at all, or maybe not even know they have it.
Yeah. And so you combine that with 60 plus something percent of the state vaccinated or eligible. They always have to throw eligible on there because we're not including still children under 5, and that's a huge chunk of the state's population in Utah. So eligible people, 68%, 69% vaccinated, fully vaccinated, meaning which we're still right at this point calling that 2 shots and a booster. So, it's done unless and this, as I understand it, I'm not an expert, but as I understand it, a variant that resets everything at this point is unlikely. It's a possibility, but it's unlikely. The biggest threat along these lines is going to be, and fingers crossed this doesn't happen for some time, some other virus jumping across that human-animal bridge, which, if you want to read a scary book, and this is interesting, I've told Bill this story before. How unlucky is this author? I'll link to it on our Facebook page because right now I can't remember the author's name, but he's a virologist. He wrote a book about coronaviruses and published it in 2019. Can you imagine that? You worked 10 years, trying to write your research as a scientist up into a book that the public can consume.
And everybody was like, yeah.
And what's nobody bought it. Nobody cared. It was a book about how often coronaviruses actually cross over and why it doesn't lead to generally a large global pandemic. And the book basically, I'll distill it down to this. There's a story in the book, for example, about this village in I don't remember what part, but there's monkeys in the trees. It's in Africa, sorry, but I don't remember what part. But there's jungle-type landscape around where this village is, but there's also desert. And so they farm normally for their food, and then it had been a particularly dry year. And so they started eating the monkeys. They started hunting and eating the monkeys because that was their only source of food that season because the crop yield had been so poor. And there was a coronavirus. They call it a bridge between, animal-human bridge. There was a coronavirus crossover. It ransacked the village, but it turns out that it was with this specific coronavirus, it was not very contagious. It was more of it had to be transmitted through contact. Someone had to wipe their nose and then shake hands, basically, to transmit it. So that stopped it. But then also, so many people in the village getting sick attracted all this attention from researchers and others from a nearby city, and they went out and they were able to contain it. And he talks about how this happens a lot more than people realize. And he's kind of giving a warning in the book that one day there's going to be one that comes along that is airborne and stays in the air long enough to be highly contagious, and after it's exhaled, and that's going to be a problem, and we're not prepared for it. That's the message he's basically writing about in 2019. Publishes his book. Nobody buys it. It's taught in a few classes. That's the end of it. A year later, almost exactly, if you look at the publication date, the pandemic breaks out, and this guy who should be heralded as a hero for the message he was laying out gets a little more notoriety. Finally, his book sells pretty well, at least, and is now taught in a lot more classes. But the reason I bring this up again is that with where we're at with the pandemic, there are still risks. There could be a variant that makes that suddenly we're scrambling and playing catch up, as Governor Cox laid out just before March 31st. The official wind down of Utah's emergency response began in March and was to be completed by March 31st. Governor Cox in that press conference said, we're going to leave certain things in place so if we do have outbreaks, we can respond. But from the data we're seeing, these outbreaks are going to be small and easily contained, like that story from the book I was telling you about that I'll link to on our Facebook page if you want to get a copy, talking about those villages where it was contained to a village and never became a global pandemic. So that's what they're thinking Omicron will be. It'll be the end of the pandemic officially. Now there's Omicron. I don't even know if they named the new variant. But it's definitely, it's holding up in the data. Again, Utah seeing 7 consecutive days, first time in more than a year, 7 consecutive days of a reduction in cases per day, reduction in hospitalizations today, which are already extremely low in contrast to where we were this time last year or even this time last fall. And also, thankfully, the most important statistic, a constantly decreasing number of deaths each month in the last 2 months. So good news on that front. So if you'd like to see this, the Utah Department of Health put out what was kind of a mega final report today. And I've also linked to the Tribune's Robert Gerke, his poop watch, as he calls it, with the data from the sewer systems. There are 11 communities in the valley, 11 sewer systems, basically, or not in the valley, in the state. There are 11 sewer systems in the state in which things are increasing as far as the data coming out of that sewer monitoring system. But the state at large on the downhill slide and picking up speed in that downhill direction. Check it out. I've linked to this final mega report from the Utah Department of Health on our Facebook page, and we'll be back right after this.
Hi, it's Congressman Blake Moore here. Like many of you, I grew up next to the runways of Hill Air Force Base, with the familiar sounds of freedom flying overhead. Utah's defense industry has doubled since 2015, making up 10% of our state's GDP and supporting over 200,000 jobs. As Utah's only representative on the Armed Services Committee, my number one priority has been meeting the needs of Hill Air Force Base. That means fighting for the F-35 program, nuclear modernization, and a locality pay that covers Utahns' living expenses. I want to thank our uniformed personnel and their families, as well as the tens of thousands of Utahns working to support our national defense. Your service helps America fly, fight, and win, and I will continue to advocate for your priorities in Congress. To learn more about how we've delivered for Utah's defense community, visit my website at blakemore.house.gov. Paid for by official funds authorized by the U.S. House of Representatives.
Dear Legacy House, thank you so much for the way you care for Dad. I'm sure you've discovered what a character Dad is. Oh, he loves to tell stories. Heck, some of them might even be true. Like the time he fell asleep in a train car in Logan and ended up in Preston before he could get off. Dad wasn't excited to leave his farm where he spent the last 55 years, but we're sure glad we chose Legacy House. And honestly, he's glad we chose Legacy House.
Stop by on 1400 North in Logan. Legacy House of Logan.
This is Ty over at Chim Chimney Fireplace. A lot of people hear our name and think we just sweep chimneys. While that is definitely our heritage, we specialize in providing the very best fireplaces and stoves to new and existing homes. We invite you to come see why low-price stoves lead the industry in performance and quality. With Fireplace Extraordinaire Fireplaces, we can bring any of your designs to life. From cozy and traditional to sleek and modern, come experience the warmth at Chim Chimney Fireplace in Logan and Brigham City or online at chimchimney.com.
Procrastination isn't a valid retirement strategy. If your saving for a retirement approach involves the phrase, "I'll get around to it someday," it's time to make someday into today. Edward Jones can help. Contact your local Edward Jones financial advisor to get started today. Visit edwardjones.com or stop by your local Edward Jones office. When it comes to meeting your retirement goals, time can be on your side, and there's no better time than now. Edward Jones, making sense of investing. Member SIPC.
All right, I talked too much about Robert Gerke's Poop Watch report to do justice to the Senator Mike Lee story. I've linked to some of the coverage on our Facebook page. We'll talk more about it on Monday. This is going to be an ongoing story, but the shortest version, CNN got a hold of, through public records request, got a hold of texts between Senator Lee and then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. And the one that is topping all the headlines regarding the Trump attempt to overturn the election, or Trump's people looking for some way to try and overturn the election, a tweet from Senator Lee saying to Mark Meadows, "What should I be saying publicly here?" Or what should I be saying here, in reference to speaking publicly about overturning the election or the attempts. It doesn't look good, and of course, his opponents in this upcoming primary piled on it today. I've linked to some of the coverage if you want to read it over the weekend. We'll be talking more about this in the future, and I'm sure as we sit down and speak with each and every candidate, including Senator Lee himself over the coming weeks, this will come up. So it's not the last you've heard of it here on our show. The For the People movie show with Andy Morgan right after this here on KVNU Logan.